These are 7 software bugs that caused a global catastrophe. Number 7. Soviet nuclear defense systems.
This is the threat.
If there were ever one specific day when the world could have ended, it most likely would have been this one. In the early hours of September the 26th, 1983, a siren went off in Russia's defense headquarters in Moscow. The radar detection system showed 4 nuclear warheads heading towards Russia. This was during the peak of the Cold War, when tensions between the US and Russia were at an all-time high, and nuclear annihilation was in one man's hand. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov had to make a decision. Either report to his seniors of a nuclear attack or call it a possible malfunction in the system. He knew that the protocol in such cases was an immediate full-scale nuclear retaliation. Petrov reasoned that a US first attack would involve considerably more than just a handful of missiles. And so he informed his generals of a false alarm. It later emerged that the satellites wrongly detected sunlight being reflected off high altitude clouds as missiles, and the signaling program did not account for such high altitude clouds. Somehow we were one switch statement away from World War III. Although you and I would have been kick-ass characters in the Fallout universe. But what happens when a software bug creeps into the stock market? Number 6. Knight Capital Group.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
It's 2011. The United States is finally recovering from the financial crisis. Stock markets are hitting all-time highs, and people are finally getting onto their feet. And then
Knight Capital.
Knight Capital.
Knight Capital Group. Who is to blame in the Knight Capital debacle? Is it man or machine?
Knight Capital is what's known as a market maker. These are huge trading firms that use computer algorithms to buy and sell large amounts of public stocks from various sources. They then use those stocks to transact with brokerage firms like Fidelity and Robinhood for a small fee. And finally, normies like you and I can get our stinky little hands on that sweet, sweet Nvidia stonk. Knight Capital was the largest market maker in the US, managing trades worth over $21 billion daily. After a week-long coding marathon, developers at Knight Capital pushed some code to their main systems just like any other week. The problem was that the code that they pushed onto the main system had some faulty logic that was only supposed to run in a testing environment. A testing environment is where developers code and test new features before they're shipped to the public. Thousands of nonsensical buy orders per second were sent all across the stock market. For the next 45 minutes that the bug was live, they lost a whopping $500 million. That's more than the total profits the company made in the 15 years of its existence. Knight Capital never recovered from this incident and eventually got bought by another market maker, which got bought by another market maker. Capitalism! Speaking of capitalism, number 5. Microsoft CrowdStrike.
At CrowdStrike, we monitor trillions of cyber events to detect threats and prevent breaches before they happen, to keep your business from becoming history.
In July of 2024, the entire world stood still as 8.4 million Windows computers got bricked simultaneously thanks to a software update pushed by a cybersecurity firm, CrowdStrike. Airports, hospitals, banks, even McDonald's drive-thrus were affected, forcing hungry TikTokers to use their microwave for the first time in their lives. CrowdStrike provides a service called Falcon that uses AI, cryptographics, and a bunch of Silicon Valley buzzwords to protect your office computers from hackers. Now, usually when an app on your PC or Mac has a bug, it doesn't really affect your entire computer. But as Falcon had access to the most integral parts of your computer, like your RAM, GPU, and kernel drivers, any screw-ups on their part could lead to the inevitable blue screen of death. And that's exactly what happened. The funniest part about this story is that the internal software that was meant to catch all these bugs itself had a bug. It's estimated that around $6 billion was sunk down the toilet in just 1 week. That's more than the GDP of 23 countries. Now imagine the world running on self-driving cars powered by Windows 11 and then this happens. Microsoft! If you enjoyed the video thus far, do hit the like button. It's the only way the YouTube AI recognizes me. Share the video with someone you know. and see how they react to it. And for more disaster stories on science, tech, and research, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Number 4. The Patriot defense system.
And this is the heaviest raid so far, so close in. Maybe the outskirts have been pounded this way, but certainly several planes came right over the hotel.
If you want to shoot down an enemy missile heading your way, then go and get yourself the Patriot air defense system right now, just for $4.5 million. That's me doing an awkward infomercial for you. The Patriot defense system is the most advanced anti-ballistic interceptor ever created. It looks at anything unwanted flying in and around your airspace and shoots it down with high precision. Sometimes. In the early 1990s, Iraq attacked Kuwait. The Gulf War began, and America came to the aid of its allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel. They deployed the Patriot defense system to counter Iraqi Scud missile attacks. Each Patriot system has an inbuilt radar that could detect and automatically launch depending on how far its targets are. But unfortunately, the radar system had a fatal bug, causing it to be off by over 600 meters or half a mile. This meant that the radar would detect an incoming missile one moment and it would completely disappear the next. The issue came to a head when one night in Dhari in Saudi Arabia, one Iraqi Scud missile was fired and the Patriot defense missiles did not even leave the ground. 28 American soldiers were killed and more than 100 were wounded. Makers of the Patriot defense system, the Raytheon company, supposedly fixed the bug. And today they're worth $150 billion. And I was told contract killing was illegal when I was choosing a career. It was either that or YouTube. Speaking of illegal killings, number 3, the Therac 25. Right after World War I, doctors started experimenting with radiation as a miracle cure for cancer. Radiation in the form of high energy electrons or X-rays can damage the DNA structure of cancer cells, killing them completely. Early radiation machines, better known as linear accelerators, was built with a turntable that needed to be physically adjusted by an operator and pointed at the cancerous area of the body. As you can imagine, any screw-ups by the operator could expose these high energy beams onto healthy skin tissue, and you don't want that to happen. So in 1976, the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited developed the Therac 25, an automated radiation machine that completely ran on software. As it turns out, the software was a buggy mess from day one. The turntable that would automatically position the person in relation to the beam was inaccurate. If an operator made adjustments mid-treatment, then the magnets that were supposed to filter off any excess radiations would completely malfunction, hitting the patient with an insane amount of radiation. The normal amount of radiation given to a cancer patient is between 50 to 100 rads. But one patient was exposed to 25,000 rads. That's hundreds of times the radiation you'd receive standing inside a nuclear reactor. 6 people were killed and hundreds injured in the 10 years that the Therac was operational. After years of investigation, it was found that the code was written by one single person, a coding hobbyist who left the company 2 years after release of the machine. You know what? To be fair, everyone makes mistakes. Even NASA. Number 2, Mars Climate Orbiter.
I'm sorry to report that we have a serious problem with the Mars Climate Orbiter. We may, in fact, be facing a loss of mission.
Try and remember the last time you f***ed up something super obvious. Now multiply the f*** up by 200 million. That's where we're heading. Before Elon Musk made going to Mars his very own side hustle, NASA was trying to study the possibility of life on Mars. In 1999, NASA and Lockheed Martin initiated 3 projects to land on Mars. One of these projects was the Mars Climate Orbiter satellite, whose main mission was to deeply understand the Martian climate. To get the satellite from Earth to Mars, it had to follow a very specific path in outer space, which it did using its onboard thrusters. The NASA scientists and engineers calculated the amount of thrust it would take to follow the designated path, fed it into the system, and things looked A-okay in the beginning. But unwittingly, the scientists had run the calculations in pounds of force per second, i.e., the imperial system of measurement. While builders of the satellite, Lockheed Martin, calibrated the system in newtons of force per second, the metric system. And because 1 pound force is equal to 4.45 Newton force, the satellite was thrusted onto a grossly inaccurate path. So inaccurate was the trajectory that the Mars Climate Orbiter has never been seen ever since. The project costed NASA and the American taxpayers $200 million. But gladly enough, NASA learnt its mistakes and 5 years later landed the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter exclusively using the metric system. It seems like the US is still big on the imperial system, making them modern day imperialists. Speaking of the United States, number 1. Equifax.
Breaking news from the credit monitoring company Equifax. Cyber thieves making off with private information of 143 million Americans, nearly half the U.S. population.
If you live in the US and have a credit card, you might want to consider relocating. Banks and credit card companies share all your personal information and your transaction history with a credit agency who then crunch the numbers to generate your very own credit score. If you've ever taken a loan, you know how important your credit score is. And Equifax happens to be the largest credit agency in the United States. To crunch these millions of numbers, Equifax used an internal software called Apache Struts. And in March 2017, the Apache Foundation, the company that oversees Struts, announced that its software code had a known vulnerability, and clients were informed to update their software ASAP. The bug allowed hackers to get access to any client data using a hacking technique called remote code execution. Even the United States Department of Justice warned Equifax of this issue. But upper management thought, it really wasn't a big deal. More importantly, they knew that they had to shut down their systems for a while, costing them millions. Sure enough, only 2 months after the initial warning, some Russian hackers got access to more than 143 million people's personal information. That's around 56% of the adults in the US. The data includes your name, age, address, phone number, even your social security number. Hackers or anyone with this kind of data can easily create credit cards, bank accounts, buy a house, get a loan, all in your name. In 2020, the hackers were caught and extradited to the US, and Equifax lost a class action lawsuit worth over $425 million. But unfortunately, if you're from the US, chances are that your data is still floating around in some random Russian server. Now, a smelly-ass programmer like me messing up is one thing, but a Nobel Prize winning scientist, that's kind of world-ending. So check out the 5 Nobel Prize winners who turned evil. I'll see you there.